It's your time for Chai with Nanise. Get ready for substance, clarity, change, and especially empowerment. Get ready to turn over stones, uncover stories, and get to the heart of the matter in every area of your life. Any mood runs, any emotion flies, and your dreams are within your grasp. There are no limits or boundaries, and your comfort zone is out of reach, yet it's the safest place you will ever be. Come in, sit down, and have some chai with Nanise.
Hi, welcome to Chai with Nanise, and I'm Nanise. I'm so glad you're here tonight. I have a really exciting show, one of my favorite topics to speak about, and it is the courage to be the real you. The reason that I picked this topic tonight is because, well, the new year's coming, 2009. I can't even believe we're reaching 2009 already. And so many people are coming to me and asking to make changes in their lives, but they don't know how. They realize that, well, maybe their life is not the way they want it to be or the way it could be. And they're really struggling to figure out what changes they need to make. Maybe this is you too. Maybe you're thinking, well, the next year's coming and I really want to make some New Year's resolutions. I really want to make my life the way I always dreamed it could be. And is that even possible? Yes, it is absolutely possible to create your life around your dreams and live your dreams for the rest of your life. I know this is true because I've come the long road and I can speak from experience that wherever you are now, you can change your life. You can change your life to one that is phenomenal, one that is extraordinary, one that reflects the real you. But the secret, because I'm sure you're wondering what the secret is the courage to be the real you. The reason people have unhappy lives is because they're not living their own life. They're living someone else's life. And maybe that someone else's life is their parents or society or teachers or spouses or children, friends even. It could be anybody or everyone. It's more likely everyone because people influence us. And before we know it, our lives are not our own anymore. We're living everybody else's life but our own. The only way to create the life that fits you, the life that you will be most happy living, is to discover the courage to be the real you. Now, what does that mean to be the real you? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight, and we're going to talk about what it takes to become the real you. So listen carefully. The first thing I want to say, and you may have heard me say this before on past shows, is that of all the people who have ever lived or will ever live, there is only one you. Think about that. You are a unique and amazing being with very special gifts and understands of the world that only you can perceive and express. No one perceives life. No one perceives fun. No one perceives the amazing gift of life as you do. Now, you may think that there are many things for you to do in this lifetime, but the only thing you ever really have to do, believe it or not, is simply be the greatest expression of who you really are. This is your only job. All those other things that you think you have to do in your life, no. They come out of being who you really are. Your only job is to discover and express who you really are. How extraordinary is that? The pressure's off. And yet it can be a very challenging thing to discover and express who you really are. Well, maybe now, but maybe in the next half an hour or so you might think differently. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard just to be yourself? Well, I'll tell you my theory, and it's this. From the time we are very young, we're given messages that tell us that we have to act in certain ways to be accepted, rewarded, and even loved. Unfortunately, when we do act certain ways in order to get our needs met, like accepted, rewarded, loved, and so many more, it means that we must deny or even sacrifice who we really are in order to become, listen to this, who someone else wants us to be. Listen to that. Again, when we act in certain ways to get our needs met, it means that we must deny or sacrifice who we really are in order to become who someone else wants us to be. Once those special parts of us are buried or forgotten, they're very hard to recover. But they're still there. and it just means that you have to dig a little deeper. Now, being yourself should be the simplest thing in the whole world, but for most people it tends to be the most challenging. It tends to be most challenging because once we go on a road of life where the most important thing is to get our emotional needs met, like being loved, accepted, rewarded, appreciated, we forget what it is that makes us most happy. I'll tell you a little story. So years ago, I was in a relationship, and I was in a relationship for about 5 years, and I'd say about a year into the relationship, maybe a little bit more, I began to discover that I was miserable. I was miserable, but I couldn't quite figure out why, and I couldn't figure out how to be happy. And so the relationship continued and continued and continued. Well, after a few years, I began to discover that what was happening is I was not being myself. I had changed my behavior. I had sacrificed what I wanted and who I was in order to get my needs met. At that time, the most primary need for me was to be appreciated. And so my boyfriend and I worked together at that time. We did house remodeling and buying and selling houses and, all that stuff. And I realized that I began to do things that I really didn't want to do. And I began to do so much more than I really felt with my share or that I wanted to do. And when I started asking myself why I was doing those things and why I was bending over backwards for him, for the relationship, I began to realize that it was to get the need of appreciation met. Yes, that I needed appreciation so much that I was willing to sacrifice myself and do things that I normally wouldn't do and be someone who really wasn't me in order to get appreciated. Well, at the time it didn't seem so lucky, but hindsight, it was very lucky because I never got that need met by him. I realized maybe by year 4 that I was never going to get the appreciation that I wanted in this relationship. And at that point, I began to let go of that need. Well, I should say I let go of the expectation that he or anyone else would meet that need. And I began to meet it myself. I began to give myself the appreciation that I wanted and deserved. And I took that power away from him or anyone else in my life. And once I did that, I was able to end the relationship. And then I started to get back in integrity with who I was and what I wanted and where I saw my life going. And yeah, it was a hard ending, not just for the relationship, but letting go of the expectation that someone else meets my needs. But when I did that, I took my power back and I started to find the space to be myself, to have the courage to be who I really am. And it's never changed from that moment. Because I realized that whenever I sacrifice myself or change my behavior for someone else to meet my needs, whether that's appreciation, love, acceptance, whatever it might be, I lose myself. And if I lose myself, there's no way I can be happy. There's no way that I could feel good about myself. And so I have committed to myself to always be in integrity. And what that means for me is that no matter what, I will be myself. I will look inside myself and listen to that voice inside of me and be who I really am, no matter how the world reacts. Maybe it's so challenging to be our real selves because it means taking huge emotional risks, like I did in that relationship when I decided to take responsibility for my own needs. But think about it. When we fear vulnerability, rejection, or even unworthiness, we hide our real selves and try to be someone else in order to move towards the illusion of safety or security. But the truth is, every time you act in ways to avoid vulnerability or rejection by others, you reject yourself. Think about that. Every time you act in ways to avoid something, you reject yourself. So if you're trying to avoid rejection by others and you change your behavior, what you're really doing is rejecting yourself. Even if someone does accept you, you will never really feel their acceptance because it's not the real you they're accepting. If you change your behavior to get someone else to accept you, even if they accept you, you won't feel accepted because you're not being your real self. You could only feel accepted when you accept yourself for being your real self. And only when you are your real self, express your real self, can you truly feel what others have to offer you in terms of love and connection. What you want, the love, the connection, the acceptance, the appreciation, you could only really experience that from others when, one, you are your real self and you're expressing your real self, and two, when you give that to yourself, when you love, accept, appreciate, connect with yourself, your real self. Not everybody will love you or even like you, but if you love and like yourself, you'll be amazed at the beautiful quality of meaningful relationships that you will create and attract. Now, if we've grown accustomed to protecting ourselves from rejection or feeling unworthy, it becomes very, very difficult to let down our guards and just be ourselves. I know. Many people describe it as suddenly running naked through the streets, exposing all their flaws and faults with no place to hide. I don't know about you, but that sure doesn't sound appealing to me. And it certainly doesn't feel safe. But, it's a big but, the real risk is not in exposing your naked self. The real risk is continuing to hide yourself and never claiming the life that exists now, especially for you, just by being yourself. And right now, even as you're listening to me, you have that choice to make, to choose to be yourself, even if you don't know what that means right now. But it does mean that you take the risk. It does mean that you let go of all the ways that you think you've had to be in life in order for other people to love you, like you, accept you. But as the new year comes, if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to start living the life that you have dreamed of living, this is the only choice. Anything else will be temporary. A new job, a new relationship, a new house, a new dress, a new suit. Any of that. It will just be a temporary fix. Ultimately, you will not find happiness, because the only way to be happy in your life, the only way to really be successful, is to discover and express who you really are in every area of your life. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever feel like something is missing, but you don't know what? Most people say they do. I've worked with a lot of people around the world for many, many years now, and so often I hear something's missing, but I don't know what. And it's interesting because regardless of a person's success in life, material success or any other kind of success, most people feel that something is missing. What those same people don't realize is that the something they are missing is actually just being who they really are. When we deny who we really are and try to be someone else in order to protect ourselves or get our emotional needs met, just like we've been talking about, and empty feelings created inside that cannot ever be filled with anything other than just accepting and being who we really are. That emptiness that you may feel, it's because you're not there. What's empty is you. And what can fill that emptiness is you, who you really are. Many people try to fill this emptiness with things like food, relationships, material possessions, or addictive substances, only to feel emptier when the distraction wears off. Can you identify with that? No matter how hard you try to fill this empty space, in the end, the only answer to fulfillment is simply being yourself. You are the answer you have been looking for. What amazing things might happen if you just let your guard down and decided to be your true self. Can you imagine the emotional freedom that comes from being yourself? The freedom you've been looking for, whether you realize it or not, is right there in the choice to be yourself. I know this because I was not always living from my true self. In fact, I grew up in Queens, New York, an only lonely child, and didn't have a lot of friends, and tried to do everything I could for people to like me. And after a little while, I actually figured out how to act in the world so that I would have friends. And I really did a good job because it worked. But then something happened. And it was probably when I was about in my early 20s. I was miserable. I was depressed. In fact, I was chronically depressed for many, many years. Also, little side note here. All depression is a result of not being who you really are. And I think we'll do a show on that in the near future. Anyway, so I find myself in my early 20s, and I'm miserable, and I'm depressed, and it's hard to get out of bed in the morning, and I have no energy, and I am just lost. And I didn't know what to do. And I started to look for answers, and I couldn't find any until one day I went into a little bookstore in Roslyn, New York, on Long Island, and I was looking through rows and rows of books. Something really spoke to me. And this man came out of nowhere, never saw him before, never saw him again, and he walked over to me, reached up to the top shelf, he was very tall, pulled a book off the shelf, handed it to me, looked in my eyes and said, "Here, you need to read this." Well, I looked at the book, and it would have been a book I never would have picked up. It had an odd cover and an odd name. But the way in which it was presented to me was so dramatic that I had to buy it. I had to read it. And that's exactly what I did. The name of the book was The Mystic Path to Cosmic Power by Vernon Howard. So I bought it and went over to a nearby pond and sat down on the lawn and had all these ducks running around me, and it was just a beautiful place to start sitting and reading this book. I must have sat there and read for 3 or 4 hours. That book changed my life. That book made all the difference in me discovering who I really am. And there are many, many things I learned from that book, but the most important thing in relation to what we're talking about now is I began to realize that I was living my life out of guilt and obligation. That everything I did in my life, I did either because I felt guilty or I felt obligated to, or I wanted to get my needs met. At that time in my life, my mother and my boyfriend were the most important people in my life. And every day I was doing something for each of them that I really didn't want to do. I did it because I felt I had to, that I had no choice. I felt guilty. I felt obligated. I wanted them to love me, all that. Well, by the time I left the park, I wasn't even done with the book, but by the time I left the park, I realized that I needed to take my life back. I needed to take my choice back. I needed to stop doing things out of guilt and obligation. And so I made that commitment to myself, which is the only real commitment that you could ever make, the ones to yourself. And I went home and everything changed for me. And I started saying no. I started not doing things out of guilt and obligation. And for a short period of time after that, well, I say a short period, at the time it seemed long, for months after that, they both, my boyfriend and my mother, called me, "You got it, selfish," over and over again, because they were used to me doing everything for them. And now I wouldn't do it. Now suddenly I was at choice. I was doing what I wanted to do. And I was so clear in my decision that no matter what they said to me, it didn't influence me. And as I started saying no to them, being self-full, something else kicked in. And that was, I suddenly found space to start looking inside myself. I suddenly found space to start discovering who I was and what was right for me. And I started doing things that I never did before. And little by little, I realized that I was getting happier and happier and happier and more fulfilled and more fulfilled and more fulfilled. And it was wonderful. And I didn't do anything special. You can do that right now, too, by taking your choice back, by being who you really are. Well, the oddest thing happened, because after about 6 months, I realized that I was doing the same things that I used to do. But now it wasn't because I felt guilty or obligated. Now it was because I felt so good about myself and felt so lucky and happy that I had an abundance of energy. I had an abundance of love. And so now those same things that I did out of guilt and obligation, now I was doing them because I really wanted to do them. And it was a completely different energy. And that was a long time ago. And even to this day, all the choices I make, I look inside myself and I choose. I choose from who I really am. And the people in my life know that when I do things for them, when I show up for them, it's not because I have to or should or I feel guilty or obligated. It's because I really want to. And what a gift that is to the people in my life. It creates so much space in relationships, so much abundance of love and connection. I'm very grateful. So, you're probably thinking, or I'm imagining that you're thinking, what's required to be your real self? What is required to be your real self? Well, I've got a list of things here that I'd like to share with you. The first thing is reevaluating your life. When you finally decide that the cost of not being yourself is too much to pay, the first step to take is a non-judgmental look at your current life. Non-judgmental is you give up all the stories you've been telling about yourself and your life. Non-judgmental is you release all the judgment. And you just look. You just observe. You notice all the ways that your life does not fit you, and all the ways your life is out of alignment with who you are. It's important to approach this evaluation with curiosity and surrender judgment. When you approach with curiosity, it allows you to see things you otherwise wouldn't see. When you approach with judgment, it's hard to see the truth of anything. It locks you in and it keeps you from making changes. Yes, judgment will lock you into what is wrong, while a sense of curiosity will begin to loosen your past reality and allow you to start thinking about what is possible. A willingness to be honest with yourself is also required in all areas of your life in order to determine where you are out of alignment with your real self. Now, that combination of non-judgment and willingness, they work together, because if you approach your life, the reevaluation of your life, with a complete willingness to want to see what's true, and you release the judgment, then you start standing in a place of truth, and that's where you can make changes. If you approach your life with judgment, there's no way to make changes. Part of that is because you won't see everything about your life. And you know when you get judgment because you get a feeling come up inside of you. And that feeling may be uncomfort, discomfort. That feeling may be, oh, I don't want to look at this. That feeling may be anything that makes you feel bad. When those feelings come up, you know you're making judgments. And that's when it's time to surrender them and just approach the observation of your life, the truth about your life with a complete open mind and open heart. The second thing is unconditional self-acceptance. Offering yourself unconditional self-acceptance creates an energy in your life that extends out beyond your current reality and allows you to be yourself in everything you do. Think about that. Offering yourself unconditional acceptance creates an energy in your life that extends out beyond your current reality and allows you to be yourself in everything you do. Now, we hear so much about, unconditionally accepting other people and unconditionally accepting our partners and our children and unconditionally accepting, whatever it is. And what I say is forget about unconditionally accepting everybody else. Start by unconditionally accepting yourself. Because the only reason we ever judge anybody else is because we're first judging ourselves. If you release judgment about yourself, if you accept yourself unconditionally in every way, There's no way you could ever judge anybody else. And this will give you the freedom to make the changes in your life that you need to make. When we do judge ourselves, it actually becomes more difficult to change because we're afraid of our own criticism if we fail to meet our expectations. Because we are our worst critics, aren't we? No one criticizes us like we do. You know that chatter in your mind, the critic in your mind. It's probably busy most of the time, if not all of the time. And that's what's keeping you from creating a life that supports who you really are. And why is that critic there? It's not a bad thing. People think, oh, that's such a bad thing. No, it doesn't serve you, but it's not a bad thing. The reason that we have this negative self-talk, the reason that we have these mind critics inside of us is to keep us safe. Their job is to keep us from doing anything that might threaten our security. So the inner critic goes, oh, you can never do that, or you're stupid, or, why did you do that? And it's really on our side because that's the part of us who is trying to keep us from doing anything that might hurt us. The ironic part is it keeps us from also being our true selves. So, the first thing to do is just to release that inner critic, that judgment. Turn the volume down. Pretend you have a little volume control in your mind, in your head, like you do with the TV or radio or your computer, and find that little dial or control knob, and just turn those voices down in your head. Try it. It might just work. Unconditional self-acceptance does not mean you don't change. Now, because a lot of people think that, well, if I unconditionally accept myself, then that means that I'm just going to stay the way I am. No. Unconditional self-acceptance allows you to change. It allows you to reevaluate your life, to look at yourself, to make the changes that you want to make. Self-acceptance allows you to look within, uncover your own truth, and then take that truth and manifest it in your life in ways that really support your greatest and most extraordinary self. Unconditional self-acceptance is an essential key to give you the freedom to be yourself. Unless you find that unconditional acceptance inside of you, you will struggle with being who you really are, or even discovering who you really are. The next requirement to be your real self, vulnerability. Yeah, being vulnerable means that you stop hiding who you really are in order to feel emotionally safe. Vulnerability creates the space for you to be the same on the outside as you are on the inside. When you allow yourself to be truly vulnerable without apology or excuse, you discover an intrinsic strength that rises up from within. And that strength is real and indestructible. You realize that the safest thing to do is just be yourself. I grew up with two parents who would never, ever, ever be vulnerable at any cost. I don't think I ever saw my parents cry even. And that taught me to hide my own feelings too, because it just seemed like it wasn't safe to show them. It wasn't safe to show my soft side. It wasn't safe to talk about, my fears and anything else that I thought made me vulnerable. But I understand something different now, and that is when we accept who we really are, when we can approach ourselves without that judgment, we allow ourselves to be soft, to be vulnerable. And we realize that there's nothing to risk. Because if you're not looking to get your needs met from somebody else, then it doesn't matter if you're vulnerable. People are afraid to be vulnerable because they're afraid of what other people will think about them. People are afraid to be vulnerable because they're afraid if they're vulnerable, they'll be rejected, or they won't be loved, or accepted, or anything. People are afraid that if they're vulnerable, that they won't get what they think they need from other people. But when you truly accept yourself, and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, what happens is you discover who you really are. And the more you discover who you really are, the more you can connect with other people. And the more you can be vulnerable with other people. and the more they can be vulnerable with you. And that creates a foundation for really beautiful relationships where people can be their real selves. What we're missing in relationships so often is that we've got such walls up, we're hiding ourselves so much that you've got, a husband and a wife, or, two friends, or a mother and a child, and they've got so much distance between them because they're just afraid to be their real selves. But when people allow themselves to be real vulnerable and they allow themselves to be their real selves, the relationships that they have, the relationships that they can create, become amazing, become the relationships they always dreamed about. The next requirement to be your real self is soul worth. When you base your self-worth on your possessions, your accomplishments, or how you think others see you, your worth is transient and depends on things you can't control. This type of worth brings fear and anxiety with it because it's dependent on something external. How can you be your real self if your self-worth is dependent on external things or things that can change or go away? On the contrary, if you base your worth on your highest self, then it doesn't matter who approves of you or what you acquire or accomplish. Your worth is guaranteed and unconditional. Your worth is unconditional. And it's unconditional whether you know it or not. You just have to find inside of you where you know your worth is unconditional. You have worth just for being. This is soul worth. When worth is guaranteed just by being, you suddenly have a lot more freedom to discover yourself and be who you really are. I spent a good part of my life looking for self-esteem, and that was a necessary step. I really believe that. But the way that I found my self-esteem was on how I looked and what I acquired, or how much money I had, or how nice my car was, all these things. And I realized that if I lost one of those things, like if I gained some weight, or my car got old, or the money dwindled in the bank, or whatever happened, I didn't feel good about myself anymore. And I soon realized that that wasn't really a sense of inner worth, because if it goes away, then I don't feel good about myself. And I began to discover that the only permanent sense of worth is what I call soul worth. That just because you are, just because you be, you have worth. It's unconditional. You don't have to do a thing. You don't have to change a thing. You don't have to prove a thing. Just for being, you have unconditional worth. Gets the pressure's off. And you don't have to try so hard. The next requirement for being who you really are is realigning current relationships. When you make choices, or I should say when you make the choice to be the real you, it means that you will likely disrupt the dynamics in all your relationships where you have not been yourself. And this is the thing that many people don't want to see happen. However, some of your relationships will begin to shift to support you, the real you, while others will naturally fall away. Yes, there are going to be relationships that end, but the ones that remain and the new ones that will arrive will be more satisfying than ever imagined. It is only by being who we really are that we can connect with others. The most essential piece of any connection is the real you. And when you begin to show up as the real you, it gives other people permission to show up as the real you. Because I am always my real self, people that are in my life often say to me, I can just be who I am around you. And then we have an amazing time. We have an amazing relationship. The next requirement to be your real self is speaking your truth. Once you start telling yourself the truth, the next step is sharing that truth with others. Even when we don't speak, we are still communicating something. It's time to stop being afraid of those consequences. It's time to stop being afraid of the consequences of what might happen if you are your real self, if you give up being who you thought you had to be in order to get your needs met, in order to continue relationships. The greatest consequence is to sacrifice the beautiful gift of our lives because we are too afraid to stand in our truth. So yes, there might be consequences just to stand in your own truth. There might be consequences to being your real self. But the greatest consequence is to sacrifice the gift of your life because you're too afraid to stand in your truth. When's the time to start speaking your truth? Now. Especially in those areas that were silent, that you were silent before. What truth do you need to start saying to the people in your life? And yes, you can absolutely speak that truth from a space of love. Very often we think when we tell someone the truth, we have to be really mean. No, you can find a way to say it from a space of love. Next requirement, stop caring what others think. Every time you alter your behavior because you worry about what others think, you are not being your real self. The truth is that you can't please everybody no matter how much you monitor your behavior, right? You monitor it now and you're not pleasing everyone. So why not just please yourself? In order to be your real self, you must stop caring about what others think. Caring about what others think is different than caring about others. Think about that. Caring about what others think is different than caring about others. You can still care about others and give up caring about what they think about you. You can care about them and give up caring what they think about you. As long as it matters what others think about you, you'll never be free to be yourself because you'll always be monitoring. Oh, what should I do? What should I say? Oh, if I do that or say that, they won't like me. Oh, no. You are the only one imprisoning you. When you stop caring about what other people think about you, you also give them permission to be themselves as well. I know as a parent that the greatest gift that I want to give to my children, and do give to my children, is the space and opportunity to be who they really are. And I model that. And they get it. In fact, I was interviewed recently on another radio show, and I talked about this. I talked about, just being your real self and stop caring what others think and, all of that. And my oldest son was listening to the show, and he went, huh. And I asked him later on, I said, what was the huh for? And he goes, I never realized that people weren't their real selves. I grew up being my own self. That's all I know how to do. Just be my own self. And then he smiled because he got it. He realized that that's the greatest gift, the ability just to be his real true self. Next requirement, take chances and make changes. If you haven't been your complete self, you've based your life and relationships around a false image. If you haven't been your complete self, you've based your life and relationships around a false image. And that can mean your job, and that can mean where you live, and that can mean how you dress, and that can mean how you talk. Taking chances and making changes means that you start recreating your life around your most authentic self. Being your real self means taking chances and making choices that support you, regardless of whether others approve or not. It means that sometimes you go against the grain and do what is right for you simply because it feels right for you. The people in your life right now might negatively react, but it is your life we are talking about. And your life is more important than any reaction you will get from anyone else. Again, if you reject yourself, it doesn't matter who else accepts you. When you make changes that support the real you, a new freedom emerges that will carry you forth to an amazing new life. The life that you always dreamed of having. It's there waiting for you. Next requirement. Boundaries. Boundaries allow you to be more of who you really are. Boundaries allow others to understand what is acceptable and not acceptable to you, and what they can expect from you. When you say no and mean it, it frees up time and energy to say yes to those things that you really want to do, because they are an expression of who you really are. What boundaries do you need in order to be your real self? Keep in mind that some of the most important boundaries are the boundaries that you will set with yourself, just like the commitments you will set with yourself. Now, that may seem like a lot, but if you take one thing at a time and you just work at that one thing until you master it, then the next thing becomes easy. And the next thing after that becomes easy. At first, you may not be able to discern between the real you and the false you, because you've grown so accustomed to acting in ways that support, well, the false you. But being the real you requires an almost daily analysis of what supports you and what doesn't. Being the real you requires an almost daily analysis of what fits with who you really are and what doesn't. It's like using an internal navigational device to set and reset courses over and over and over again. And that navigational device is inside of you. That navigational device is your intuition. It's your gut. It's your feelings. It's looking inside and asking yourself some pretty hard questions. But it's worth that. Eventually, you will arrive at your destination. But you have to be committed to going there. As your path becomes clear and the real you naturally emerges over time, your choices will seamlessly align with who you really are. You'll know that you are choosing your life from the real you because it resonates deep within. But until then, an act of faith is required. Fortunately, there's a guiding intuitive force helping you uncover who you really are. There is a guiding intuitive force helping you uncover who you really are. And that force is inside you. That force is your intuition. It's who you really are. It's a higher power. It's God. It's whatever you want to call it. But it's there for you even now. And the more you start to tune in and listen to it, the louder the voice will become until it's seamless and it speaks to you every moment of every day. When we make a commitment to being ourselves, magic begins to happen. And our lives begin to take on an effortless flow that brings us fulfillment in every moment. When you really master yourself, when you really master being yourself, your life becomes the life you have been dreaming about from the time you were very young. You see, even in our youthful dreams, there was a deep desire to be who we really are. Our dreams revolve around the act of being who we really are. We carry those dreams with us into adulthood, but they often seem to grow further and further away because what's required in order to attain your dreams is the courage to be the real you. Your dreams are nothing without you, and it's impossible to attain them without bringing your whole real self to the table. Whatever it is that you want in life requires the courage to be the real you. We only have another minute here, but I want to end with telling you that initially it's not easy to be the real you. When you first begin to reclaim your identity and choose to be yourself, you're going to discover that many things in your life really don't fit, and you need to begin to release and say no to all those things and people who don't support your most authentic, real self. This might mean changing courses, renegotiating relationships, or even some relationships ending. And that's okay. That is okay. It might take an entire overhaul of your life, or at least the life you're pretending to live. But is that what you want? You want to live a life you were pretending to live, or you want to live your real and most extraordinary, most fulfilling, beautiful life? It might be a challenging path at first, but if you really want a life that is full of joy, bliss, and fulfillment, there's no other choice. No matter how young or how old you are, your dreams are still waiting for you. you would like to share your thoughts, your questions with me, please, I welcome you to email me at Nanice, at Nanice Ellis, Nanice, at nanice.com, or go to my website, nanice.com, nanice.com, and I would love to hear from you. I would love to support you in the path to become who you really are. Thank you for your time tonight, and you have been listening to Chai with Nanice. I'm Nanice.
Thank you for having Chai with Nanice. Please go to www.nanice.com for great free stuff that will empower you to live your best possible life. Free books, articles, shows, meditation audios, and so much more at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. Nanice's books are also available in all major bookstores and Amazon. Check out The Infinite Power of You, Even Gandhi Got Hungry and Buddha Got Mad, Zest Point, Lip Prints, and many others by Nanice Ellis. To find out about one-on-one coaching and how Nanice can personally coach you to experience your best life possible, please email mybestlife@nanice.com.